Hi everyone, so today we're going to be focusing on the skill I can make a line plot to display a data set. So before we start, we need to know a couple pieces of vocabulary. So a line plot is a type of graph where you can record lots of different data to see how often something comes up. So then we need to know that data are pieces of information and a set is a group. So we're trying to look at groups of information and we're trying to find out how often they come up. So I have a big garden in my yard and I need to figure out how often I need to water my plants. So I started measuring the amount of rain we get by using a rain gauge. And so rain gauge is you put out and you can measure how many inches of rain we got over a given time. So I try and check mine every morning so I know if we got any rain overnight, it's how much rain we got in a 24-hour period. So I started recording the amount of rain we were getting in April. And these are made up numbers, but you'll get the idea. So I recorded the days that we were getting rain, and I wrote down the amount of rain that we got in a 24-hour period. So I want to plot these numbers on a line plot. So the first thing that I'm going to do is draw a horizontal line. And this should start making you think of a number line or a timeline. So we're going to put the arrows to show that it could go in either direction. And now we need to look to see which number is the smallest amount and which number is the largest amount so that we can determine what our endpoints should be on our line plot. So if I look here, I see that 2 3/4 is the first number that I come to. So I need to see if there are any numbers that are smaller or larger than 2 3/4. Ooh, first thing I notice is 1/2. Okay, I know that 1/2 is smaller than 3/4. It's a pretty small amount. It's in between 0 and 1 inch. So we're going to see if there's anything that's smaller than 1/2 of an inch. So I saw 3/4 is the closest number that we have to a half, but that is larger than 1/2. So I know that the smallest amount is going to be between 0 and 1 holes. So I'm going to label my first endpoint as 0. And now I need to be able to figure out what my other endpoint is going to be. So now I need to look for the largest number. So here we found the smallest. Now we're looking for the largest. We know that 2 3/4 is much larger than 1/2. So we're going to look to see if there's any number in this list that's greater than 2 3/4 inches. Ooh, 3 inches is greater than 2 3/4. So we're going to see if there's anything that's larger than 3 inches. Nope, so there's not a larger amount than 3 inches. So we're going to write that as our other endpoint. So that was our largest. So now I need to be able to break up my number line so that they're evenly spaced. So I need to have 0, 1, 2, and 3. So I have to figure out how to split up my number line so that I have 1 and 2 also on here evenly spaced. So I'm going to be breaking my number line up into thirds. So those are about equally apart. Okay. So now I have my whole numbers listed, but I notice a lot of these numbers also have fractions. So now I need to go through and I need to label my fraction amounts. So the easiest way that I can do that, when I start noticing I have fourths and halves, ooh, okay, I know that I can easily change 1/2 into a fourth by multiplying both the numerator and denominator by 2. So 2/4 is equivalent to 1/2. So I know that I can split each of my whole numbers up into fourths. So I split halfway in between, and then I split half of a half. So it's kind of like a ruler that we have different amounts listed. And then I'm going to label those amounts. So I have 1/4. Okay, and then I don't have to label any more numbers. I do need to make sure that I also include a title so that people, when they're looking at the number line, know what the unit is that we're referring to. So these numbers all represent the amount of rain in inches. So my next step is I'm going to go through and I'm going to show how many times a measurement comes up by putting a little X above the number on the line plot. So if I start off with 2 3/4 inches, I'm going to put an X over 2 3/4 to show that we had 1 point where that came up. So I'm just going to lightly cross out that number to show that I've already plotted that on the line plot. So I'm going to keep going. 1/2, 1 1/4, 3 inches, 1 1/4. Ooh, and we'd already had 1 1/4. So now I'm going to draw another X right on top of that first one. 3/4 inch, 1/2, 2 inches, 2 inches, 1/2 inch, 1 3/4 inch. Okay. So now when I'm looking, I can tell that most of the time it rained in April, we were getting one-half of an inch. And I can tell that because we have 3 X's representing 3 days where it rained half an inch. The least common So we could kind of answer this in a variety of ways. So the least common could be 0 inches, 1/4 inches, 1 inch, 1/2 inch, or we could list it as where we see 1x, that was the least common. So for now, I'm going to show 3/4, 1 3/4, 2 3/4, and 3 inches. So that could tell me that I need to water my garden a little bit because most of the days it rained, it didn't rain very much. So for classwork today, what I'd like you to do is you are going to take out your coordinate plane and line plots packet, and you're going to open up to page 6, which will look like this. And page 7, which looks like this. And you're going to first create the line plot, and then you're going to answer questions about how many jars come up in that line plot. So that's going to be work on page 6 and 7.